And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here, and today I'm going to be taking a look at a game that is not out on the market yet, but one that has been successfully kickstarted, and that is Sunrise City by Clever Mojo Games. Now, as you might have guessed, this is a game about building a city. And you're going to be selecting different roles as different members of city council or different members of the city, zoning out areas to build your buildings on, and then building either new buildings or building up buildings in order to try and earn points. And you're going to want to accumulate a specific amount of points in order to get victory points, which are going to win you the game. So now that I've given you that brief overview, why don't I give you a look at what's inside this box, which you'll be seeing prototype pieces, but it'll give you an idea of what you might get. And then I'll show you how the game plays and give you my final thoughts on it. So the first thing you're going to notice is that this game comes with a ton of tiles. And there are two different types of tiles, but we're looking at one type here, and these are called zoning tiles. And these are going to be the major constituents of the zoning portion of the game that I spoke about in the introduction. You'll see that we have different zones, which are indicated by different colors, and that tiles have different features. You'll see that this is a residential zone tile here, indicated by the pinkish red color, and that around it there is this gray border, which indicates sidewalk, and this will be important for placing zones. You'll also see some black specks on here. They're going to be blue in the final game, but here they're black, and these represent water, but that's not important on this tile. Now here we have a green tile. So this is a park and rec zone, or green, doesn't really matter. But you'll see on two sides it has sidewalk, and then on two sides it has water. When you're placing zones, you must always place a zone so that it has at least one sidewalk-to-sidewalk connection on the board. And I'll show you that when we're doing placement. There are three other types of zones. There's the mixed-use zone, which is kind of a wild zone for building buildings on. There are commercial zones, which are blue. And then there are industrial zones, which are yellow. And these are basically just going to be different colors that are required. They kind of set prerequisites for putting your buildings on top of them. You need to match building colors to zone colors in order to play them. Finally, there's a special type of tile, and these are going to be called community tiles, and they exist for each of the colors. And these are tiles that are going to be put out onto the board. They will not be built on top of with buildings, but they will be used to increase your score for buildings that you build that match their color. The second type of tile you're going to have in the game are going to be building tiles. And you'll be getting allotments of these each turn, but essentially they're going to represent the same colors that you saw on the zoning tiles, except for that each one is going to have two sides to it. And they'll sometimes show different colors, sometimes they'll show the same colors. But on this one you can see we have a yellow or industrial zone, and a green and a park and rec zone. There's also going to be some numbers on the tiles. In the center you'll see the number 7 on this tile, which represents how many points you get for playing this tile if you're the player that put it down. On the two different segments here you can see numbers in the corner. We have a 3 and a 4. These points are going to go to whoever owns the zoning area that you play these on if you play it as a first floor of a building. So for example, if the green player were to own the yellow segment, they would get the 3 points, and let's say you owned the green segment when you played this, you would get the 4 points. And you'd score these on a point track, and I'll show you how that works a little bit later. Now you'll see these come in different colors. So we have a yellow and an orange, we have a purple and an orange or pink, and the purples are worth no points. The reason purple is worth no points is because purple is a wild color in both zones and buildings. If you have a purple zone, you can play any color building on top of it, and if you have a purple building, you can play it on any color zone. There are also tiles which have the same on both sides. You'll see this tile is worth very little. It's only worth 2 points and 0 to each of the people who own the zones. But then there are some that have, for example, 2 blues, which is worth 4 points, and 2 points to the people who own each of the zones. And you'll be playing these out as first floors or additional floors on buildings in order to earn your points. Taking a look at the rest of the components that aren't tiles, we can see that we have several different wood components. We have these stars, which are going to represent your victory points, and I'll show you how you earn those, because simply earning points is not enough in this game. You need to pass a certain point threshold in order to earn a star, which will be your total victory points at the end of the game. Each player is also going to have a stack of bidding chips, which will be used in the bidding phase. They're made of wood, and they have the Sunrise City logo on them. These are actually final quality components, so you'll see they're rather quite nice. Made of wood, thick, sturdy, good pieces. And as I said, you'll be using these to bid on different zones in order to control them. You have your scoring pawns for each player. one meeple, which is for one of the roles that you can play throughout the game, and then these wooden cones that you can use in order to indicate levels of buildings, because you'll get additional points for building higher floors on buildings whenever you build an odd floor above level 1. So level 3, for example, would earn you an extra point, and you'd put one of these on level 2 in order to show that the next time you build a floor you get an extra point. If you were on level 4, you'd put 2 of them on there to show that you get 2 extra points when you build level 5. In addition to all of those wood components, we have cards, and these cards are going to be the roles that players take throughout the game. And in the beginning of the game, each player is going to be dealt 4 of these cards, and they will draft cards one at a time in order to get their 3 roles that they'll use in the 3 rounds of the game. So essentially each player is dealt 4 cards, and they'll take one of the roles, pass it to their neighbor, take one of the roles from the person who passed them their cards, and continue doing this until they have 3 cards. The last card will be discarded. And the roles do 2 things. The first thing is that each round you're going to choose one of your 3 roles to play. The number at the top, whoever has the lowest number, is going to be the first player for that round, and then play will proceed in clockwise order. The second thing is that each player will get a benefit from their card. So for example, we have the zoning commissioner here, whose ability says that during the zoning phase, you receive double district points each time you add to a district. And that'll make more sense once I cover gameplay quickly here. But you may have the city manager, who says during the construction phase, score 1 point when any building tile is placed adjacent to a community tile. And I showed you those community tiles earlier, but each of these has a different benefit which will adjust how you play during the phases of the game. The whole point of the game is to score points, and the score track looks an awful lot like this. Players will have their pawns, and you're going to score a point at any time that you land on or pass this star at the top. So essentially you want to get points in groups of 10. Now, when you get to the 10, if you land exactly on it, you're going to score 2 points, or 2 stars. If you go past it, say you score 11 points and you start at 0, you're only going to get 1 star for passing it. So it's beneficial to score in exactly 10-point increments, or to score, let's say if you're on the 5, to score 5 more points to land on the star. At the beginning of the game, you're going to start the game with just City Hall in play, and City Hall shows north, south, east, and west. These are the directions that you can zone in. And you're going to draft your cards. Each player is going to have roll cards, and they would each select one of their cards at the start of the round separately and flip them all up at the same time, and whoever has the lowest number is going to go first. So I have number 3. I would probably be the first player to play. Also at this time, players are going to get 4 zoning tiles, which are going to be these square tiles that I showed you earlier with the zones on them, and they're going to get 4 building tiles, and each player will have 4 of these that they're going to try and use to plan out. And you'll kind of want to take your building tile configurations into account when building or zoning out in the districts. So I have some yellow, some green, a lot of green and a lot of yellow, and some wilds. And now in player order, we'd take turns going around the table playing tiles out. And you have to play it so that there's always sidewalk to sidewalk. So for example, I could play this green tile here. And let's say the next player would then play, and they play this pink tile or red tile right next to that. And then the next player goes and they play a yellow tile, sidewalk to sidewalk here. And then the next player goes and they play another yellow tile. Now there's a bonus for creating districts, which are areas of like tiles. For each tile that you place that is adjacent to another tile of the same color, adjacent being directly to any of the 4 sides, not diagonal, you're going to score 1 point. So this would score 1 point for yellow, and they would mark it on the scoring sheet. That's the only way to score points during zoning. This is going to go on until all of the players have placed all 4 of their zoning tiles out onto the board, creating the city, and then you're going to go on to the bidding phase, in which you'll try and control these zones. Now that the players have set up their city by zoning, they're going to go ahead and they're going to do bidding, which is trying to control these different areas, and they'll be using their bid tokens in order to do so. And starting with the first player, again, the person with the lowest numbered roll card, they're going to choose one of these zones and they're going to place one of their tokens on it. And this means that they're bidding to control that area. And then in player order, you would go around trying to control different areas. And the reason you want to control areas is because if people build over them, you're going to get points for it. And you may only build on areas where you have at least 1 token. So if I were to build a building here, I would have to control one of these 2 spots. Now, you're going to go around bidding in turn order, and we've actually set up a 3-player game here. So let's say red bid there, and green bid here, and then it comes around to blue, and blue contests green's bid. It doesn't matter how many tokens you have on this spot, it only matters who's on top. So right now, blue controls this. If green were to play again on top of it later, green would control it. If at any point it goes around the table and green is able to play 2 tokens in a row on a spot, it would lock down that spot and no one else would be able to bid on it, controlling that spot for the rest of the round unless somebody's card allows them to break that rule. Players would play until they've placed all of their bidding tokens out onto the board, in player order, and then you would move on to the construction phase. Now, starting in player order again, and let's say green's first, they're going to go ahead and build buildings on these tiles. One important rule to note here is that you may not build across water, so you may only build sidewalk to sidewalk for first floor buildings. So let's say that green wants to build this building here, a green and purple building. They have to control one of the 2 squares that they're building on, so they control this green square here, and then the purple can match any color since it's wild, so they could either choose red or their own green here. Now, since purple doesn't give them any benefit, they'd probably want to choose red's token because it won't give any points to red, and somebody could still play over their own spot here. So they would simply place this tile onto the board, right here, removing both of the tokens, and then they would score 4 points for placing it, and 4 points for owning the green spot that they played on. This would give them 8 points, which they would mark on the tracker, and they'd be 2 points away from getting to that 10 spot where they would get 2 more points. The next player could then build another building, and let's say that red is next, and they want to build this yellow building, and they just happen to own these 2 yellow spots. They would remove both of these, put this down here, and they would score 6 plus 6 more points for owning the 2 spots it was played on. If blue, for example, had owned one of these 2 positions, they could have played this here. Red would have scored 6 and 3, and blue would have scored 3 points for having owned the other spot. Later in the game, you're going to end up with scenarios where players have built and you have really either no area to play on the board or it's beneficial to you to build up higher. In this example here, you can see that I could build a red and a green across this spot here if I were to have them. So let's take, for example, this red and purple building. I could build this building between these 2 buildings right here, but for scoring second floor buildings or higher, you're only going to get the center points. So you no longer get the bonus zoning points as no one owns the zones, but here you would score 2 points for placing the tile. At this point, you would put out one of the floor markers, and the next person to build over this spot would earn an additional point for completing the 3rd floor. Any player that placed a purple building next to this police station surrounding it would score 1 extra point. So this building here would actually be worth 1 more point when it was built, as would this one right here. Players are going to continue building buildings until they can no longer build any buildings from their hand, or all of the buildings in their hand are gone. After that, you'll proceed to a new role selection phase, followed by preparation, more zoning, and then more bidding and building. The game will end after 3 phases, and whoever has achieved the most stars by landing directly on that 10-point spot, or passing it, will be the winner. And that's Sunrise City. Now remember, you were looking at prototype pieces there, except for the wooden pieces, which are final quality, and I must say, very nice quality. The game itself is a pretty good game. I like the strategy in trying to set up the zoning for the buildings that you have, trying to control areas that you want, but maybe also that other players want in order to score points off of them, and the strategy that goes into maybe making a what appears to be suboptimal building play to score less points, which actually earns you more stars or final victory points at the end of the game. Maybe you could score 11 points on that track, but scoring 3 actually furthers you more than scoring 11 does. So the game is very good, not as good with 2 as it is with 4, but still good at both player numbers. One that I would suggest for maybe a little bit of a lighter game. It's not a real heavy game, but definitely one that has its levels of strategy for all types of gamers out there. So even though Kickstarter is done for Sunrise City, I suggest checking it out once it is in publication. I think it's a game that many different types of gamers will enjoy.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.